At ASA, Lonsdale said that Itweka was a myth. And that, since I was sitting there, sent me wondering what he was talking about. So at question time, I asked him why, if indeed Itweka was a myth, why did the British government go out of its way in the late 1920s to stop the myth? He did not have an answer. Later on, a friend of mine, Atieno Odhiambo, told me stop harassing people with questions. The next episode at Oxford, and the discussion was mainly about Mau Mau and Tom Wolfe. Most of you know who he is. He's a friend of mine, sitting somewhere in the back. Raised voice, wondering what was so special about Mount Kenya, given that there was a bigger mountain in Tanganyika. And I quickly responded to him and pointed out that the chaga near Mount Kilimanjaro never shot at the white man. So that's why they're not talking about Kilimanjaro. What do these stories mean? The hostility that is evident in some quarters today, and it's ingrained even in the so-called international community, is not a new thing. It's a product of conditioning, colonial conditioning, such that people, some automatically react in a particular way when they hear about Mount Kenya. Its foundation is colonialism, imperial interests, particular British imperial interests, in conquering, exploiting, ruling an independent people in the process of colonial state establishment. The establishment of colonialism tended to block the activities, the movements of peoples where they were, or they were supposedly were. And apart from blocking them, it took away freedom, independence, sovereignty of the people. So people stopped being sovereign, having independent decision-making capacity. Now the tools for doing that, mainly soldiers who did the conquering, beat up people. The missionaries whose job was to brainwash, convince people that everything about them was terrible, evil, and therefore should be destroyed. Nothing that identified as an African was good. And since it was supposed to be evil, it had to be destroyed. Therefore, help to create new identities of subservience to a foreign entity. So we all became subjects of the king or queen in England. Next were the administrators. Once people were conquered and they were converted, they had to be administered and to be made to work in the service of the colonial state. So they became subservient and obedient to a hierarchy of new powers. You have the king in England, the governor, the chief native commissioner, the provincial commissioner, the district commissioner, the division officer. And they were all white. Below that, they created a category of administrators. These were the chiefs. Some prominent people were declared chiefs. Where there were no prominent people to use, they created them. And their main purpose is to recruit or force other Africans to go and serve and work for the new entity. So we have this combination, and each was supposed to know his place. The new identity that came up, all Africans were called natives, irrespective of where one was, irrespective of wealth, irrespective of education. They were all natives, as long as they served the colonial interest. The minute they questioned that, then they were reminded that they were not the same. They were different. That's when they became tribes. You question the colonial authority, then you are a Maasai. You are a Kyuk. You are a Mkamba. You are Luya. You are Giriama. You are Teso. And you are supposed to be fighting each other, not to be working together. So you have these two things developing. Native in the service of the colonial state, tribe when questioning the state. Sometimes the missionaries would forget what their role was, some of them, and they would need to be reminded by the provincial administration that their job was to soften the native for capitalism, colonialism. Sometimes the missionaries would fight and confuse people as to who should be converting people where. And it is because of that that they came up with a zoning strategy. If you notice, there are some areas which are predominantly Methodist, predominantly Anglican, predominantly Presbyterian, some areas AIC. It was zoning in order to have harmony among the missionaries, because they were giving a bad example or bad picture. If you are preaching about the same God, how come you are quarreling? How come your version is different from the other one? So the zoning came into the picture. By 1914, all Africans, now called natives, were virtually defeated, and therefore had to accept the new reality. The responses they had mounted varied from place to place. Some tried to put up a little fight and they got beat very badly. And once they were all beat, some then accepted the new reality wholeheartedly, even the idea that they should lose their African identity. So they lost because they embraced the new one wholeheartedly. They were told that everything about them is evil, so they accepted that it is evil. And they made progress in that way. Others accepted that reality, not in total, but as a strategy to find out. That's why when you engage in some warfare, and the colonel will know better about those things, and you are not doing well, you retreat a little bit, not to surrender, but to re-strategize. And there were those who accepted the new reality, not in totality, but as a way of figuring out what to do. So they went to those schools. And they learned at least how to read and write. But they did not stop thinking. There are those who stopped thinking, but there are those who continued thinking, although they had been told that their thinking was bad. It is those who continue to think in the light of the new reality who became instrumental in raising questions about the emerging colonial state. And among those who did that, reportedly, were people of Mount Kenya. There's a conqueror who became fairly famous, Francis Hall, sometimes described as the conqueror of the Kikuyu. And he did an interesting job. But before he died, he predicted that one day there will be such a war in this place, you would not want to be there when it breaks out. His reason? These people are bad people. They don't listen. They don't obey like other people. And if he had his way, he'd wipe them out. To teach them a lesson on how to listen to instructions. So they are hard of hearing. The problem was, they are also very hardworking. If you want anything done, ask them. It will be done. So you have this problem. You want to wipe them out, and you want some work done. So he ended up being very comfortable with the people he wanted to wipe out. He's the one who created some chief called Karungi. That's one man. When he died, the colonial government, the British government, honored him by naming a whole district after him, Fort Hall. The next one was Captain Maynard Sagen, sometimes better known because he is the one who subdued Samoa in Nandi. He tricked him and then got him killed. Now, Maynard Sagen is also known for really killing a lot of people in Kihomboine area, Muranga. And he did that because the people of Kihomboine were so naughty. They had captured a white man, pinned him down, and reportedly the whole village lined up to go and pee in his mouth until he died. So, but he also said, one day, a big war will break out between these people and the white people. He lived long enough to see it. So the reputation is coming. These are bad people. They don't listen too good. They are also dangerous because they can create problems if you are not very careful. Now, the evidence of some of these things are associated with the emergence of the independent churches, people who accepted the tenets of Christianity, but tended to reject the European variation of it. Because there used to be something we called European Christianity as opposed to Christianity. So these people are questioning the European Christianity that was embedded in the missionaries. So in the late 60s, I think it was Kanyada who was asking, whether one stops being a Christian because he's an African, or he stops being an African because he's a Christian. Which is which? So what do we have here? Questioning minds. They have accepted some things, but not everything. Now, the symbol of this questioning mind was Haredhuku. Haredhuku represented a new thinking, a belief that the people in England, the real masters, did not know of the bad things that were happening here. So he started writing letters to England to complain about the misdeeds of their representatives. He also linked up with other agitators across not only the African continent, but all the way to the United States. So he was corresponding with Marcus Garvey. Whenever Dhuku went to a place, usually after the governor has been there, his crowds were bigger than those of the governor. And he countermanded whatever the governor was saying. So he became a dangerous man. Because whatever the governor says is reduced to nothing by this man who comes later, and he has a bigger crowd than that of the governor. So he had to be arrested. And he was arrested, Central Police Station, as it's called now. And some people demonstrated there. And one of them was killed. Not one, but several. The first one to die was Mary Yanjiro. So she became a heroine for that. But the shooting in that place raised a lot of questions about what was going on. Dhuku was deported to Kismayu. In those days, Kismayu was part of colonial Kenya, before it was donated to Mussolini by the British to fulfill World War I promises. Now, then what do you do? Dhuku probably had received the wrong education. So craft a new education system that will condition the natives to accept their place at the bottom of the ladder. And what do you teach them? Good things. Carpentry, mechanics, plumbing. And these are good things, good skills. But don't let them have any idea about philosophy, history, things of the thinking thing. Because the minute you expose them to those things, they start demanding things. So make them good plumbers, nothing else. That was the thinking. They sent a commission, the Phelps-Stock Commission, to go around Africa trying to analyze and recommend the type of education that should be given to natives. And among them was a black man from the Gold Coast, James Aggrey. And his job was to convince natives, because he's black, that they should accept what they are told. And he did that. But then there is a difference between the message transmitted and the message received. And among some of those people who received the wrong message, people like Kwame Nkrumah in the Gold Coast, Mbioko Inange in Crown Colony and Protectorate of Kenya. Mbioko Inange happened to be the son of a chief. And the sons of chiefs do not become very good plumbers. They rule. So they wanted to go to where Aggrey had been to get that education that made him accepted by the white people. Because what they saw was this black man who is moving around with white people. So why? Whatever he has, they want it. Ombio Koinange went there. The other thing that happened was to stop natives coming together in any political sense. What Dhuku had tried to create for East Africa, the East African Association, should never be allowed again. So if natives have things to say, they should say them in the local native council. And the local native council presided by a DC, therefore controllable. This type of things. It was such that it does not matter who you are. Whatever you want to say it in the local native. So Jomo Kenyatta, when he returned from England in 1946, and he offered his services to the colonial government. Now he had worked in England, had taught in various institutions. He should be of value. He was told that whatever he has to offer, he should go to Kiambu Local Native Council. You can see the mentality. Anything you want to do it there, where the DC is supervising you. So what do you have there? Now things are beginning to boil up. Out of the local native council, some of those thinking natives try to recreate Dhuku's movement by calling it something else. The Kikuyu Central Association. And those who created it then decided that the people in England did not know what was going on. They should send a delegate there. So they sent who? Jomo Kenyatta. They wanted to send Buta, but Buta was busy. Message, let the people in England know. Because the assumption is that they don't know what their representatives are doing here. Kenyatta went there twice, and the second time he lived for a long time. He visited Europe. He went to Russia, where he was at the University of the Toilers at the Kremlin. And he was kicked out, or he ran away. We don't know which one is which. He ended up in Germany. He saw Adolf Hitler, and he ran away very quickly. He was in Denmark. And he saw how they ran the cooperatives and milk industry. And back to England. And in England, he ganged up with other black people, especially when Mussolini invaded Ethiopia. And when Selassie ran away to England crying, one of the people who received him was Jomo Kenyatta. And they became very good friends after that. Kenyatta also was in the forefront of something that was coming up, an intellectual challenge. So up to that time, you are told that colonialism is good for you natives. Came to help you. Came to give you I don't know what. And having found himself in a university classroom with the colonial policy makers, like Marjorie Parham and Louis Leakey, with whom they used to insult each other in some strange language, he produced a book, Facing Mount Kenya. Facing Mount Kenya was not about the customs of the Kikuyu people. It was not about anthropology, although it was anthropological. But the book was not about those things. The book was about challenging colonial benevolence, colonial claims to the country. That's why in the preface he thanks the professional friends of Africa, those who would like Africans to be seen to be perpetually ignorant so that they can be speaking for them. We still have them, even now. Those professional friends of Africa who not want to hear an African speaking or saying anything. Those who like Africans to be looking up to the white man all the time. So he thanked them for inspiring him to continue. So it was a challenge to the what? The colonial benevolence? The idea that colonialism is good? And he was not alone. The whole thing. So what do you have? There is a growing challenge to the colonial benevolence. The Mussolini attack in Ethiopia stimulated Pan-Africanism. Black people, wherever they were, came to the conclusion that they were on their own. You cannot rely on any white man, whether he calls himself communist, capitalist, or some other East. You are on your own. So bonding up. And it became very strong. Now Mbio Koinange returned to Kenya after passing through England, where he became a good friend of Jomo Kenyatta. That helped to design the jacket of his book. Came back with a master's degree, the first, and a couple of other certificates from Cambridge. Now, in Kenya, he was offered a job to teach at Alliance at a lower price, lower salary than less qualified white men. And he refused, arguing that he never paid less school fees because he was black. So he started his own school, Githongori Teachers College. It's supposed to have been a university in the making. And in this university, people are to be prepared for the independence that was coming, so that you have the critical mass of workers. Now those elders who may have been there, some of them remember the stress on politics. And Gettysburg Address from the USA. Government of the people, for the people, by the people. If they don't remember anything else, they remember by the people. And Koinange started also campaigning very hard for an African to be appointed to the Legislative Council to represent Africans, not missionaries, not any other good person, but one of their own. And he hoped that he would be the one. During the war, the big war, the British decided to give a little concession to the Africans. So they looked for a suitable African, and they found one in Eliud Madu. Eliud Madu was a good man. He had not gone to America. He had been to Fort Hare. Had even gone to Oxford. And he agreed to teach at Alliance at a lower salary. Therefore, he was a good man. So you can experiment with him. And he was appointed in 1944. Despite the circumstances of his appointment, all natives were excited. They looked up to him, they said, yes, he's our man. They supported him. The elite, those who had been to high school, Alliance and other places, then ganged up. And they created Kenya African Study Union for the purposes of raising, studying, and feeding Mother with information so that he can represent them properly. Castle. After some time, they got tired of studying, so they dropped the S. And it became Kenya African Union, a political movement. When Kenyatta returned in 1946, and the showman that he was, kissing the ground in Mombasa, they made him the leader of KAU. And he transformed KAU from appearing to be an elitist organization into a mass movement. Traveled all over the country. He also told his people, the officials, whatever you do, make sure that your friends out there, not in Kenya, out there, know what you are doing. You never know when you are going to need them. And if they know, they can come to your aid. So if you go some places outside Kenya, you are likely to find cow documents in some libraries dating back to the 1940s. Now, mass mobilization. He succeeded. There was excitement. And among his major recruits was one called Oginga Odinga, who thought that he could be free by having a lot of money. So he was a businessman. Low thrift. Kenyatta told him to watch a year. Freedom can only come from political activism. It's the same message he passed in Manchester, 1945, where he was a key organizer, representing an illegal organization in East Africa. He told them, whatever you do, make sure you get political power. The rest will follow. That was his motto. Political expediency all the time. So he convinced Oginga that that is the right way. And Odinga wrote in his book, he became Kenyatta's disciple in politics thereafter. So mass mobilization of people, attention. At the same time, something else was happening. In the white community, the settlers, who had struggled and had actually created what they believed was white man's country. They did that with the support of the Americans, where every white man was a king. You wake up in the morning and there's a boy, usually a grown man, holding pans for you to put your legs in. Somebody has cooked up breakfast for you and you live a good life. Nothing can go wrong. Because Kenya, as it was called, was no Gold Coast or Nigeria. In West Africa, there are not many white people. In Eastern Africa, the size of the white people was huge. And they used to speak their own language, Kisetla. So this was paradise. It cannot happen. In the Middle East, the British had been kicked out. So they thought they could retrench here. That's why they built the huge Kahawa barracks as a supply center for the empire, because it was safe. And there were other things being thought about. So the picture is, as far as the colonial world was concerned, the imperial world, Kenya was safe from some of those nationalistic agitations. Natives are happy. Yet, at the same time, there was a growing movement. Those who came from the war and they had been questioning, what were you doing there? Should read some of them or listen to them, to people like General China and say, you're fighting for whose freedom? British? Yeah. Where is yours? So by 1947-48, some DCs were noting that there's something going on. They couldn't figure out what it was. Mau, but there's something growing. And those people started doing things like advising some leaders not to make the wrong noise. And sometimes they would die. By 1952, there was an explosion, which shocked the world. Yeah? The British thought this is a small thing. They'll finish it in 4 months. They did not. 1 year, they did not. 2 years, 3 years, 4 years. Then they said, no. this is not a military issue. Yeah? Because they brought all their weapons, big aeroplanes, bombs. It was not a military what? It's a political challenge. The future of the settlers was sealed by that political decision. Yeah? The British government had to now, how do you get out of this mess? Restrictions, media control. Anyone who may have said something positive about the natives, if you are white like Peter Evans, for Jesus and off. Wherever these people are, whether it's in the US, they try to repatriate Mogaderu. Whether it's in Tanganyika, people are uprooted from Tanganyika, Uganda. There's even a story somewhere being uprooted from northern Rhodesia, just in case they might have some Mau contamination. Yeah. Isolation. So with that, a policy was developed that among all the natives, the bad ones, who should be isolated so as not to contaminate the rest. The Gema people. Eh? In fact, even the idea of Gema can be attributed to the colonialists. Because they isolated Ikoyo, Embu. They created an association. Some sort of. These are the evil ones. And to avoid others being contaminated or catching the Mau Mau disease, lock them up. The others, give them development, whatever that is. Roads, water, lands, newspapers, and tell them that they are very good. Like those. You can see the isolationism. So in putting people's heads that these are the evil ones. Everybody else is good. And it remained that way. Now, part of the concession, apart from pampering some people and saying they are good and others are evil, political concessions. So in 1957, there was an election. The first election that natives were allowed to participate in. And the British rigged that election. Because only those who were approved by them could be voted for or could vote. And if you are a good person, you could even have about 3 votes. One for being rich, one for being... So it was a rigged election. And the message was made very clear. Only those who had evidence of having denounced Mau Mau would be allowed to participate. Ikonyo Kiano once told me an interesting story. He could not vote, although he could teach in the University of Nairobi before it was. So he met the governor and asked him, how come? I can teach at the university and I cannot vote. So the governor arranged for him to get votes. So he got 2 votes. He didn't tell me which one he used or whether he used both. But that's the way it was. You have to be seen to have been actively opposed to. Now, those who are elected, despite those circumstances, stop being good boys. They start demanding more. And that's where now Mboya and Jaramogi come into the picture. Because they were elected at the same time. The media and the West created the impression that Mboya was the leader of the Africans. And other Africans were not amused. Among them, Jaramogi. So this man is younger than I am. What's this thing here? So when Jaramogi went to the logical and told people, stop telling us that we have somebody who is our leader. We don't know that person. The only leaders we know are in prison. Yeah, those are the ones we know. The others. And from that time, it became common. No politician would talk about anything without demanding Kenyatta's release. The very idea of a Kenyatta Day started in 1958 when he was still in jail. Now, what that implies is that the die had been cast. The movement towards independence was gearing up. Now, the colonialists then went intellectual. How do they maintain that continuous control after independence? Schools became critical. So those who were in primary schools, upper primary, or lower high school, from 1957, 58 to about 1963, if you can remember, and you are told something about the history of East Africa, and you read a book by Marsh and Kingsnorth, and another one by some guy called Ward. What did those books say? They said Mau Mau delayed independence. They said the villages were very good for these people because they provided services, like water, which some people had problems seeing. That's what the book said. They said that the Mzungu benefited these people and everybody. But before the Mzungu, you people used to kill each other. That's what you are planting in. They say these people are evil, should not be trusted. Now, that's what children were taught in 58, 59, 60, 61, 62, 63, 64. Now, when these people left primary school and high schools, and then they went to the universities, whom did they find there? They found the same DEOs and Johnnies who had now transformed themselves into university lecturers. And what did they do? They repeated the same. So you look at the books being read at the university level, published by Oxford and other. You go through them. What are they saying? The same what? So these youth now are university people, having been conditioned, and now the university, the reconditioning continues. They come back. Now they are the university dons. And what do? So they repeat the same thing. Was it a wonder that in the 1990s, you read articles and statements by professors and lecturers, whatever, who are repeating exactly the same thing the Mzungu had said in the late 1950s? Is it a wonder? So that explains the mentality. Ben Kip Koril is now dead. Wrote a little book, A Descent from Cherangani Hill. And I reviewed it. He told me, review my book. I reviewed it. You may not have liked the review very much, but it was okay. But in that book, he says things. That while he was at Alliance in the late 50s, they were conditioned by Carrie Francis and others on who to fear. When independence comes, you know, these people will overload you. They'll be sitting on you. Anyway, so what are we saying? The bashing of the mountain region is not natural. It is not accidental. It was well choreographed, mainly because people have been told the evil ones are those. And why are they the evil ones? Because they don't listen too good. and they challenge authority. They challenge the white man. And as Francis Hall had predicted back in 1901, and Maynard Hagen had predicted around the same time, the explosion did come. And when it came, it was devastating. As I finish, one of the impacts is that it created fear. If you notice, generally, the people around Mount Kenya, there's a chill. So they are scared. Something happened, they don't want, no. You don't want, where hit carrier? The memory of war. So people are scared. How to get out of that hell is a big challenge. It so happened that it got in so deep that some people are made to hate themselves. There are people around Mount Kenya who hate themselves for being who they are. And they would like to be maybe some other. Yeah. You know that? One prominent person said he was ashamed to have been born a Kikuyu. Anyway, that fear, that hell is devastating mentally, such that we have people who are not willing to think for themselves. We have people who, before they do anything, they consult somebody in London or New York or some other big capital. Yeah? There is a woman called me Michaela Wrong. I don't know why her name is wrong, but that's her name, Wrong. She wrote an interesting book. It's Our Turn to Eat. Have you read that book? You should read it. Because it's a repetition of the same thing, yeah? But she talks about a group of people called anti-Kikuyu Kikuyus. They are anti-Kikuyu what? And that book is widely read. So you can imagine the impact that it has. There are people who are still torn as to what the real interest of Kenya are when compared to the interest of the United States and Britain. So we are torn in this thing. And of course, other people have talked about those other impacts of acceptance of some things in westernization, such that our population is going down in very strange ways, as some other populations are rising. Thank you.
Makofi tena kwa professor. It's great learning. Professor is trying to give us a historic perspective of Mount Kenya people. And he's trying now to leave to us to analyze where the rain started beating us. It is for you now to analyze where the rain started beating us. And he's like telling us, why have you forgotten that you are the founders of this nation? Are you not the founders? That you have to forget Jomo Kenyatta? That you have to forget Dedan Kimathi? That you have to forget Mariama? Then how can you forget history in a very short memory? In 1982, they're trying to take this country by force. If someone comes to your house, he wants to marry your daughter, does he just come and take the daughter out? Si lazima ongea na wewe. You may agree or refuse. Au namna gani? But there are people who want to take over this country by force. Americans do not know how much we've suffered, Mount Kenya. to get this country. They think you are equal. Are we equal? We are not equal. We can give somebody if we want. Lakini huwezi kuwa tu because iko democracy, you can do what you want. Au namna gani? So that's exactly what the professor is trying to say. Na mimi, msinione mimi sio kijana. Mimi ni mzee. Kivimba. Sisi tumekuwa na wewe kwa peace building. Hebu simama mzee. Tumekuwa na yeye Nairobi Forum. Peace building and conflict management for 5 years. Now there is nothing like, if you do not understand politics, that you can be secure. Politics, lazima uelewe ndio to be secure. Politics, lazima uelewe ndio you can be usalama. There is no security that you understand in politics. Au nafikiri wanajezi sisi hatujui? How can someone stand up and say, Kaiseri utaona, ati wewe utaiba kura? Kaiseri ataiba kura akiwa wapi? Hata printing haijafanywa. Printing imefanywa. Alafu sasa ataiba nini? Hewa. You see, propagandism is what we are saying. Sisi watu wa Mount Kenya hatujui. Lakini ile mbwa inakoga dekagatia. Nirumaga. Ere atakogaga. Asa sisi wa Meru tunasema namna hiyo. So our next presenter is not a member of committee, but is a government officer and a member of our secretariat. So he cannot talk like me because he's serving member of the government. I have the honor to invite Daniel Maranga to give us now what we know most as security. Bwana Maranga will give you personal security lecture. Bwana Maranga.
Thank you so much, Kana Mugambi. Chairman CPS, members, facilitators, participants, ladies and gentlemen. Hamjambo. Hamjambo tena. Nashukuru. Now, my task is to try to skin this animal inaitwa security, na tutaiskini pamoja. Let me start by saying security education is both universal and unisex. Haijui Mzungu, Mjapan, Professor, Mwarabu, young or old, Mukristo, Muhindi, Muislam. And at this point I must mention that in fact Muslims have most deaths when it comes to issues of terrorism. I'm deliberately saying that. So there's no issue of saying this male or female. We say security education is both universal and unisex. In African society, in mama kwa nyumba, sababu ya protection, seeking protection kutoka mzee, alikuwa analala kwa kona. Kwa mlango, achunge mzee. Eh? Mimi nilikuwa nasikia zamani alikuwa anakaa kwa kona mzee, kama iko kitu inatokea mzee anazuia. But we are not contradicting what we are saying. Hata yeye anaweza kukaa pande hii because we are saying security is for everybody. Hata kutembea kwa barabara, hata mzee ukitembea na mama anatembea mkono ya kulia, kushoto, so that kama ni barabara gari ikipata badali ipate wewe, sababu atakuzaa, si ndio? Samani walikuwa nasema namna hiyo. And when we are talking about nyumbani, these are very basic things but we ignore them. Unaweza kuwa kwa nyumba, unajua mzee tangu zamani ndiye anafunga mlango. Siku hizi ukitegemea hiyo mzee utapata mlango iko wazi. There is an issue somewhere. Mnara ikia wazi. Iko mahali ingine ilifanyika. At the end of the day watu wakiamka asubuhi walipata wezi walikuja, wakaingia jikoni, wakapika, wakakula, wakaenda. Na mtu angerealize walikuja kugundua kwamba masufuria haijaoshwa na masahani because they didn't take anything. Just to see how constructive that can be, walifanya hivyo na wakaenda. Kwa mahali ingine mzee mmoja amepatikana na bibi yake, wamebebwa na mattress, wamelala chini, wamefunikwa na mablanketi. Kitanda hakuna. Mattress imeenda. That happens. Now, in citizen, particularly in security, let us look at it from a religious kind of lens. You have to understand we move together. Let us reflect on the story of Abel and Cain. Cain ndiye alinyorosha Abel. So when he was being asked, where is your brother? And I will say, am I my brother's keeper? The same wordings. Yes, you are your brother's keeper. Sisi tunajiuliza, are we your brother's keeper? Are you your brother's keeper? You should, but I'm asking you, are you your brother's keeper? I fear some of you are not even your own keepers. Kama yule aliacha mlango wazi, si hakuchikeep. The story went on. And what the norm it teaches is that to separate the righteousness from evil, that's why Cain was condemned according to the wildness. Now, having said that's where tulianzia from a religious kind of perspective, kwamba we should be our brother's keeper. The challenge is, what is ailing us? Why are we not our brother's keeper? If I can give an example, if I somebody had been condemned to prison for robbery. Lakini tena akapatikana Bungoma committing another robbery. Kwa Biblia tumefundishwa kwamba Cain alikuwa condemned, the story goes on to the wilderness. Awe stock na yena suka hata akienda. Lakini sisi mtu amekuwa condemned for robbery. Tena anakuwa in another robbery. Tumechungana hiyo kweli? Now let me quote Mahatma Gandhi. He read the Bible on Christianity. He ended up saying he loves Christianity but he hates Christians. Nasikia hiyo maneno. Alisoma vizuri akasema he's a Hindu, he loves Christianity but he hates Christians. And they want them to say that the Christians only practice even only 30% of Christ's teachings, the world will be a safer place to live. Let us take our case in Kenya. We are over 70% Christians. Mnasema hivyo. But if we practice only 30%, surely what is wrong with us? Shida iko wapi? Hiyo ndio mnajiexamine kama leaders, muone where are we going wrong. Now, issues of security or policing is actually basically going to the very basics. Ile mambo ilikuwa samani. There is no rocket science about this. Policing is not a function of the police. I can't overemphasize that one. I remember the chairman alianza wakati alikuwa anaonyesha the ecosystem. In his participation in security, when he demonstrated about the ecosystem, just to repeat on it very briefly, you saw about crime, poaching, illiteracy, retrogressive cultures. Yes. Tunasema kwa nyumba 10, cluster kama imeform. Pengine msichana mdogo ameenda huko Nairobi, akaona wasichana wengine wanafaa nguo fupi. Akija kwa village, anaonekana tofauti. Licha ya kufanya watoto wengine wamfuate tabia yake, kwa nyumba 10 watu recommend, anaitana nasema msichana ile kaskati ni kadogo. I like saying kaskati kale kanatoshana size ya handkerchief. Wanatoa ama wanakaongeza kanatoshana, alafu na watoto wengine wasije wakaige hivyo, because that's what can give rise to cases of even rape. And that's why we say that community policing here tunasema largely kazi ya nyumba 10 ni proactive, ni kuzuia, so that we don't get rape imekuwa committed, alafu tunaanza kusema maneno kwamba ilikuwa namna gani. Nyumba 10 itakuwa imezuia. The issue on environmental issues of rain, herb or medicine, you see, that's why the need is that wakati nyumba 10 inakaa nasema hapana, hiyo kichaka waje tuheshimu ikae namna hiyo. Name them all, the issue of magonjwa, issue of land disputes, you can agree, the police is not coming to arbitrate you, hadi mnakosana na jirani. So what I'm doing, I'm just trying to emphasize the importance that wananchi wa own security. Remember, the Kenyan model is founded on felt needs. Kwa kule Kichichi, we have had questions, mtu anasema, na utapata somebody is not cooperative, particularly in gated communities, that hataki kuingia kwa nyumba 10. What binds you is that geographical belonging. Yeye kama anataka kukaa kando, atajileta wakati shida imeingia. Because when you are as a community, kwa vitu mingi na affect pamoja. It's voluntary, citizen-centered, multi-agency approach, how beautiful this country will be if we embrace what we are talking about in citizen participation, whereby every government agencies has a stake. There is one lawyer was inquiring yesterday at the end of Katiba Forest, KWS, akasema enda utafute CID. But look at that situation whereby vile amepata hiyo anaipeleka, mambo inaendelea kutembea. I can assure you, we can end up being a very secure country. Wakenya vile wanakaa, let me reflect on a case tulikuwa Kwale. Somebody had to understand what we are talking about, security education na nyumba Kumi. Msee mmoja anasimama, bwana chairman had just talked. Unasema sasa mnatuambia tufanye maneno ya nyumba Kumi hii. Hakuna hata torch. Hakuna hata pingu ya plastiki. Ya Waswahili wale wanajua kuongea kweli. Bila pingu hata ya plastiki ya kufunga watu. But ile ni ile tuko haraka wa Kenya, ukisikia kitu unaanza kuchichorea wewe vile utafanya hiyo kazi. But we are insisting is proactive. Hiyo ni kamati ya heshima sana, iko watu wa kanisa, iko wazee, watu ambao wako na maono safi, wanakaa chini, wanaona kitu kwa mbali, wanasema hii isuiliwe namna hii. Nasema wa Kenya ni wajuaji makusudi. I remember there is a time in my home area, wakati the founding father of the nation alipass, wazee wanakaa, ni wazee, lakini Kiswahili natatanisha hao. Mzee mmoja kuna ndevu yake hivi, najua anaongea akifanya hivi, anasema hapana, hayati hii ilikuwa jina ya utoto ya Kenyatta. Na anataka convince wazee wengine washike. So wa Kenya tuko na haraka sana, tunataka tuwe mbele. Maybe kama wazee ni mtaangalia speed governor tutaweka wapi. Now, zamani kumbuka wazee both in Central and the North Rift, zamani walikuwa wanatoka, unapata kula chakula ya jioni, iko mahali wanaenda karibu na barabara. Wanaketi hapo, moto inawekwa silent. Wanaongea maneno ya security. Kisha na maana kwamba somebody anapita hiyo kanjia, anasimamishwa. Wewe ni nani, unaenda wapi? I don't know what happened. Sio kama hiyo factory ya Raymond ilikuja kaleta mablanketi watu wakapenda kulala. I don't know what happened, that wazee who used to be mentors issues on security kama wali abandon kidogo. Je, niulize, zamani mtu akitembea kwa majirani yako, pengine hata umeenda mbali, unaona ng'ombe iko kwa shamba, pengine shamba la mahindi inakula, ilikuwa inafanyikaje? Mtu anajitolea, anakimbia, hata anaita vijana wako karibu, toa ile ng'ombe pale. That is an issue ya security ya chakula. What happened? These days, hata mtu unapita unaona ng'ombe, hata kama wazee kama ninyi, wengi hawatahusika. What has happened? People are too busy. Jealousy. Name it. All those, that's why I'm saying, iko mahali tume lose track, that the very basics in terms of security that tunasema sasa, that tumeacha mbinu zetu vile tulikuwa zamani, tumekuwa accept kwa maneno mengine. Na zamani hata mtoto akichukua mayai, ameingia kwa kioski, mtu mzima anampayana mayai. What used to happen? Yeah, hata si mzazi anaitwa mayai na shuka enda leta mzazi wako. Lakini siku hizi iko namna gani? Ako na 2. Leta 10. Na wewe ni mzee unasema security, na umekuwa mlinzi wa neighbor yako. These are issues that we can't run away from. They are very basic issues, but they are really eating into us. Najia zamani mzee kuingia kwa boma, alikuwa anaingiaje? Alikuwa na tiptoe. Mzee alikuwa anaingia, nakumbuka bangu zamani akiingia, kondoo imefungwa. Mbuzi, na mbuzi hakuna mbuzi iko nje. Hii washe namna gani? What was the idea? Kama wasiana iko boma, pengine wamekuwa wakubwa, wako free na mama yao wamekaa mbaya, si wanakaa vizuri? Na kama iko kajogo nyingine komiko amekuja hapo, sikatasikia katoroka. Kama namna gani? That is still policy. Wazee walikuwa wanajua kitu walikuwa wanafanya. Sababu akija wakumbani na yeye, si pengine ataua mtu. A classic example, the other day there is a soldier who came from Somalia. Yeye anatoka Baringo. Bahati mbaya alienda kufika kwake, alipata yuko mwanamume kwa nyumba. Uliona kwa magazeti. Nani aliuawa? Mwenye boma anauawa na ila ako ndani. Na je, kama alichukua precaution ya wazee akohoe, hata apige simu, si angepona. At the end of the day, what we are saying is, as much as you want to confront it, baadaye utapata umefungwa kama niwe umeua yeye. I remember a case, that is policing. Iko case ya West Pokot. I was involved, tukaenda mahali borehole, askari walikuwa wamekosana na raia akaenda akakata chain, chuma ikaanguka kwa borehole, hakuna mtu anakunywa maji. Maji ilikuwa kidogo, askari wataka kunywa peke yao. Sisi tukaenda timu kubwa huko, water engineer, program officer ingine ya NGO fulani. Tukafika tunataka tutatue maneno. Watu waelewane wakae vizuri. Mimi assure wakati tunaanza kuongea maneno kidogo kidogo nyuki zilitokea. Zilituuma ya kutosha. Yes. Hospitali moja alikuwa Mkamba na nienjoy na niuliza anacheka pole pole. Wewe imekuuma ngapi? Mimi naambia 3. Yeye anacheka tu na wewe. Hiyo ni kimira, haiko niuma. Hiyo ni policy. Wanajua vile wanaichikinga. We couldn't explain that one tujue, lakini at the end of the day tulifimba kwa kupiwa na nyuki ambaye tuelewe walitoka pande gani. Na zamani ukicheza na pipi ya Mkamba, si mnajua? Hiyo bado ni policing. Najunga boma yako. Now, let me remind you, the chairman was talking about this one again on the issue of embracing Kumi. His Excellency the President alisema kwamba security starts with me and you, hence mwananchi first line of defense. The President mwenyewe alisema. Lakini Wakenya na mdomo, jeshi itakuwa wapi? Polisi wako wapi? Taxpayers money, mtu ya KWS prison wako wapi? Yeah, and that's what we are doing, that we join even synergies ifanye pamoja ndio watu wasonge. But look at these Kenyans, tunasema hivyo, angalia kwa magazeti na inaandikwa na watu wanatoa maoni kweli kweli. Si jeshi basi iende nyumbani. Wa Kenya tunapenda maneno sana. But we must be alive to the fact that security education among the Kenyans is very low. That's why we talk about these ones. Security education, that's why we are endeavoring to uplift the standard of security education ikuja juu. Na tunasema hii ina affect everybody. Whether we are talking of security officers na raia wenyewe, bado security education iko low kidogo. But this is largely because of where we have come from. We have enjoyed the life for a long time. Tunasema mwenye shiba juu mwenye njaa. Hiyo ndio inatusumbua. We are so relaxed, we can't learn even from our neighbors here, Burundi, whatever is happening. Tunakaa kama tunataka ku-experiment. And that's why we are appealing to you as leaders. Let us get, mahali mukasema rain started beating us, and we correct that kind of situation. There are many omissions and commissions every day. Mara mingi unasikia yuko aliens wamepatikana Karatina. Ati wanatoka Moyale. Wameshika huko Wangige. Wengine Mombasa in a house. Na hao wametoka wapi? All the way from Moyale, which is more than 700 kilometers from Nairobi. Sasa wale mlikuwa nasema ataskari wako, jeshi iko, na wamepita wakaenda wapi? And that's why we want to argument with that one, that raia akuweko. So that tukia zote pamoja, tujue ni nani amefanya nini, who committed this one. There is a case ingine ilikuwa border ya Mandera, Wajia, where there was an officer. I'm trying to clarify the fact that tusiye tukaseme polisi ndio watafanya. Hata yeye ni binadamu. Ile greed uko nayo inakusumbua, hata yeye inamsumbua. So this officer alikuwa anajulikana kwamba anachukua pesa, anatumia kwa M-Pesa to facilitate easy passage ya aliens. Wale vijana wengine wanakuja kulipua hapa Nairobi, anapata pesa kidogo kwa M-Pesa yake, alafu wanapita wanakuja. I'm trying to confirm like tusianze tuseme tutagemea bahali moja tuseme itakuwa. There was even a case in Diff in Wajia where three very good officers were intercept vijana 3 pia walikuwa wamekuja na vitu ya kuja kulipua, lakini wakasahau manyo back in Somalia. So when they were going back, our officers wakashika hao vijana. Wanaenda kuchukua ile kitabu waangalie vizuri wataassemble vitu yao namna gani. Lakini unfortunately wakati mkubwa yao alirealize iko namna gani, na yeye akapatiwa around 6,000 shillings akawaachilia. So now where are we? We are very good officers who can do a good job. Lakini haikozi moja ile mbaya sababu ya greed ambayo wanafanya vile. When the officers were transferred from there that time. Let us not talk about officers. We had a case in Western Kenya Busia Malaba. Aliens walikuwa wanachukuliwa na ndege ya Uganda jeshi, wanashuka huko Chinja, and then they made their way with a lot of ease kuingia Kenya. Walikuwa wanachukua about 25,000 shillings watu watatu, wanapea raia. This is not an officer. Kama officer anakuja kupatikana yake tofauti, but we are dealing with the case raia walikuwa involved. Wanaweka gari inaitwa Probox. Nikuja kushangaa kumbe Probox inaweza kukimbia inashinda Land Cruiser ya polisi. Probox. Wanatorosha kabisa kama yuko mahali wanaangusha mti ndio gari ya polisi usifuate. So anyway, what I'm trying to emphasize is that both government agencies na sisi should examine if we have to make our country safe. We have all seen the wanasema. So we need to correct that one. And largely this because of greed. Greed inatusumbua sisi wa Kenya sana. Kisha muda ago the former president alisema, in Kenya there is enough for everybody's needs, but not enough for what? Everybody's greed. The greed ya kila mtu itatear this country apart. You don't address that one. Now let me go back to security. Security defines us. Security defines who you are. The way hata wewe unatembea, it defines you. Are you security conscious? Kama unatembea mbaya kama mahali mawe iko, si utakongwa anguke chini. So that's why we are saying, kwa nyumba Kumi we say, wherever you are, you eat security, you dream security, you walk security. Every other time that should be in your mind. Look at the situation when termuka Kisumu. Mimi watu wa Mount Kenya, lakini siku hizi mmeanza kula samaki. Ukiingia ukule kama getheri, itakulika. Si itakuwa hapa. So you eat, the conscience should be about security. Whatever you talk. Jiko hata wazee wakikaa wanasema, huyu naye asiende mkutano, huyu anatoa maneno, akifungua mdomo. He is not security conscious. So everything we do, we have to think about security. Even about dancing. Si hata wazee wanaenda Mugithi. Usipoenda na mpango ya Mugithi, wewe unaenda ukirusharusha miguu, si utagonga wengine? Are you dancing securely? So really in everyday life what we want to talk about, security is attached to that one. Angalia hata kwa barabara Mjapan, Muitaliano, wametengeneza magari mzuri sana with specifications. Hata wanasema ina balance namna hii, weka pressure namna hii. Lakini Mkenya ni nani? Na gari na iko very loyal. Vile unaielekeza ni hivyo. Wengine akikamata task 2 3, hata mzee anaweza kususu kwa gari anasema utanipeleka nyumbani, utanipeleka wewe na itakupeleka. Si task hii itakupeleka mtaro. Ama itapindua iseme vile uliambia. So all we are talking about is that security education, that when you drink, don't drive. Because you will not be yourself. Kama gari ni defective, it's unfortunate that people died on this road. Na ikiwa examine that hiyo gari haikuwa na license, hiyo gari was defective. Lakini inanyoroka kutoka Nairobi, inaenda Busia. Actually, the greed we are talking about, the corruption we are talking about. If I may quote the president again, there is a time he was referring to the public services shida anakuwa nayo, that what is ailing his government from public servants is parent pickering na vain competition. Yaani kuongea ushindani ambayo tuchukue mahali. Kama ni mwanajeshi anasema yeye ndio mambo yote. Ingine kama ni CSU yeye ni namna hii. I remember a case in Nakuru, baba inaitwa Yetuamba. Way back in 93. It was very common to hear jeshi wanapigana na police, the police inapigana na AP. So there is this officer went to the bar, akaitisha taska yake moja. Kawaida vile anakamata taska yake, macho inaona Wanjiro ile beautiful. Naangalia mzuri sana. Na polisi naye si anakuja kutoka Central hapa Nakuru. Na yeye si taska yake inaona Wanjiro. Si watu wanakamatana mikono. Polisi anaita wenzake sababu wako karibu. Jeshi kwa la net. Si mwanajeshi kwa cell. They are serving the same government and they have the tag of security officers. That can end up going to an operation area, wanafanya operation pamoja. Wacha hiyo kufanya pamoja, wanafika normally na operation mwanajeshi Kano knows very well ndiye ata lead. Mwanajeshi ndio commander, AP polisi ni wanafuata nyuma. Lakini utapata criticism inaanza tena, lakini huyu mtu namna gani? Atufuati that command vile inakaa. Anyway, the Nakuru case, Wanajeshi naye kutoka Laneti wanakuja na ile tu gari ya vita Banhat. Wanakuja kuchukua mwenzao ameshikwa hapo ndani. Na si ni watoto wetu. Si ni mandugu zetu. But what is lacking? And that's why the president was talking about parent bickering na vain competition. Kushindana tu waje tuone nani nani. Mnaumizana vita vya panzi na nyama ya kunguru. Kama Al-Shabaab yuko anapata nafasi hapa mwenye inaingia. So this is something that really we can't run away from. Na tunaapili kwa wananchi, patika ninyi viongozi. Don't run away from that one. Mentor. Let us talk about these issues until we are working in the same direction. Recently, even in Nairobi, there is a chief inspector of police. Alikuwa amekamata tembo yake jioni. Kufika kwa roadblock, askari wanapata ni chief inspector mwenzake. Wanaweka kwa gari wanampeleka kwa nyumba. Yuko kwa magazeti pia. Chief inspector mwingine ya AP anakuja. Sisi kwa conspire wa leo namna gani? Yeye anakuja naye anaingia hapa. Lakini yeye wanashika wanapeleka cell. Nairobi. Si askari naye wanafuata yeye waenda kuokoa askari wenzao. So what are we doing? We have structures in place that can make this country safe. Lakini tuko na usungura mingi, tunajiri examine tunasunguka. Kama daktari anasema mbwa inataka kuuma mkia yake ikizunguka. And we have opportunities to be able to excel in terms of security kutumia hizo vumbi ambayo tumeweka. Even another case in Eldoret, Chang'aa raid. Mtu ya prison ameshikwa hapo, mtu ya forest. And here we are talking about government agencies that will be able to work together. Si mtu akitoka sheri atakuja kuwinda ile mwingine. So that's why I'm saying that we want to forge these partnerships where agencies work together and honestly working together to make mwananchi safe. We believe we can end up doing very well. That quotation the president was talking about, Akia Kiganjo. I end up kuambia the officers were graduate that corruption of the best is worst. Yes? Polisi wamekuwa trained, hivyo vita kitu inaitwa corruption. Wanasema sasa ni worst because ninyi mna fight, ninyi mnafanya. Ninyi wazee mwe ni wa kanisa. Muko mna head which institution, you are the best. But when you indulge in corruption, sinakuwa the worst. But we are not learning from this, but we are very ready to criticize at here anasema nini. Sianze na huko, na wewe sianze na yeye yako kidogo. Another he said he was calling on the security agents to coordinate with each other and improve the safety of Kenyans. And that's why we continue emphasizing coordination is through these partnerships that tuenda kufanya tukia pamoja. And recently, he was talking about the same Akaita, a silo mentality where each unit worked alone. All this is because of lack of security education that wewe umepata department hiyo umewekwa, unataka kufanya kivyako. Sio kwa Biblia kwa anasema one eat the way he worketh. Anasema namna hiyo. Kama ni mtu ya forest, anakula hiyo forest pole pole. Kama ni makaa inatoka, anachukua yake inaenda. Polisi akiangalia hiyo ni ya makaa, hiyo ni ya forest hiyo. But look at the situation where the police is equally concerned about hii makaa hii forest. Mahali mwananchi anahusika kichaka hiki ndio kitasaidia mvua kukuja. Because even as we have abandoned that one. Unasema ni forest hiyo, sasa hii maneno ya forest. Na tunaendelea kuumia na tuko na opportunity ya kufanya kitu. Now, why the presentation of security education? Largely it's because of different backgrounds where people come from. Wengine, we end up operating in assumptions. I worked for a long time. Kama ni chairman, hakuna kitu hajui juu ya security. Hiyo maneno najua. Assumptions. Better educated, better trained, well exposed, well protected, unquestionable. Ananswer when nani ataniuliza hiyo. Kwani kama nimeona imefanyika, nani ataona nimeona ng'ombe ikula nini mahindi. That kind of attitude. We have always survived. Mungu atatuchunga. Si Mungu anasema anachunga wao wanachichunga. But that attitude, it ails us in terms of security because we are not responding to what is expected. Lack of exposure to security education, contentment, issue of new constitutional dispensation which has happened a lot of democratic space, ambaye watu ni rahisi sana kwenda barabara. Wewe wakati unafunga barabara, tulikuwa naona hata watoto, si mwalimu aliambia peleka desk mweke kwa barabara. What are we actually doing? Wakati tunaenda that direction. And on this note, for the purpose of understanding what we are saying, tunasema tuache maneno ya positions, the issue of gender and equal experiences, esteem, and then other excesses, and address ourselves to the need that we address ourselves to issues of security. If we can define security, an environment which prevails, where citizenry will conduct the daily course and achieve their objective without fear. Mahali generally mahali kwa amani. Mahali watu wanaweza kwenda hata kwa shamba, anafanya kazi vizuri. Nakumbuka area kama wako na problem huko West Pokot. Ati mtu anatokea anaona akina mama wako kwa mto wanaosha manguo ama watoto wanacheza kwa mto, inakuwa kama ni shabaha. Anachukua bunduki, very commonly used, inaitwa AK-47, kwa kichaka analinga watoto just because wanatoka kwa jamii nyingine. Marisasi watoto karibu 6-7 na kwisha. Hakuna kitu mtoto amefanya, just because of those differences as in the tribal. So we are saying that, however, total security inakuwa si achieved, it revolves around what areas that inatufanya tukose ku achieve the security we are talking about, where the issue of communal differences ziko kama huko North Rift. Siku nyingine watoto wameuawa watoto karibu 6 kwa River Kerio just because they are from another tribe. The religious differences, this one I would like to say hats off for the Christians, like what happened in Garissa. What actually those people did while waliwa askari wakaingia kanisa wakapiga marisasi, they wanted to draw a wedge between the Muslims and the Christians. Look at the situation whereby Wakristo nao kesho yake wangetafuta masaa msikiti aende waue watu. Ingekuwa tunaelekea wapi? That's why I'm saying that Christians, nashukuru kwa religious for that kind of tolerance that we've had, and read, because violence, strength is not in violence. Strength is in examining issues and knowing how best to undo the same. The issue of political differences, like now we are having competition between NASA and Jubilee, which is healthy. But the ingredients say nakucha ndani. Kama unaenda mkutano weka mawe kwa mfuko. Are you for peace? That's why I am saying that, can we communicate particularly to the youth so that they understand that political competition is healthy, but when it comes to a situation where people have to confront one another, then that is not the business they have. We are infringing on security. The issues of resources and what, of course, in another conflict. I remember this digression kutoka, there's a case ilikuwa Nakuru, wakati we had the attack in Nairobi, your supermarket, the mall. And then there's somebody anajiita Sheikh Mayaka. Sheikh Mayaka, hata hii jina Mayaka inajulikana mahali ilitoka, na zamani Uislamu haikuwa pande hiyo. So he pretends that sasa yeye ndio Muislamu kabisa anajua. Then he says, ile imefanyika huko, Ibilisi ameshindwa. Nje kwa msikiti. Anapenda kutembea hapo nje ukiongea namna hiyo. Watu wamemwaga damu, people are fearful what has happened, lakini iko mtu. Na tumesema kwamba kama ni terrorist maichagui, hata kama ni yeye, yuta is a terrorist act akia mahali, na yeye atanaswa. Lakini haisuru, hata yeye alienda mahali ya kujua alienda pande gani. What I want to insist is kwamba wazee wa understand as much politics economic competition is healthy, but can we get to understand vijana wanataka nini? As much as we are talking, we know direction, but are we educating the youth to understand what it is? Because the youth today, if you can craft a very nice song that they can dance very easily to, si watapiga kura hapo. That is the youth. So let us not abscond from our duties as responsible citizens and our wazee, so that we can be able to make vijana wa differentiate between dancing in Ndombolo hiyo na choosing leaders. I would like to mention that when I'm talking about security, it's good to know that anything that you want to do, it's like if it's kitu nataka kuweka siri is initiated by the human being. Na that same human being, wewe mwenyewe ndio utatoa hiyo maneno. Ni kama mama, pengine anasikia amechoka, anaambia mtoto yake it happens, sitaki mtu anisumbue. Wewe mtu akikuja usimwambie niko nalala, sitaki mtu ajue niko hapa. Na mtoto will exactly report the same. Si ndio? Mama yako, alisema amechoka na wewe usema hayuko. Yeah, because you have not completed that process. Wewe unataka kuinitiate a secret, you have not educated her. Maneno kwa nyumba, we are talking about mlango wazi. You think hiyo ni business ya mzee, mmezoea mpaka inakaa wazi. We are saying that let us talk security another time. Si mtoto, si nani, kila mtu ajue hiyo. Security measures that you need to take, like in a home, never allow unauthorized entry. It's very common that sisi wa Kenya tunakuwa ni wakarimu sana. Mtu akijipanga vizuri na akamfuka anakuja kwa gate yako, kama ni mfanyikazi pale hana security education ya kutosha, atamwambia karibu. Hata atampatia kiti, hata maji. Hata ataenda kumpikia. Si mgeni amekuja na amevaa vizuri. Lakini huyu amekuja kusoma hii nyumba inakaa namna gani? Hata kama unataka kulipua alipue. Hata kama ni kutaka play some trick, abaki ameingia chini ya kitanda ngoje mwingine amefanya ameenda. All this what we are talking about all around kwa nyumba, right kutoka mfanyikazi. Natakana awe amejulishwa how to behave. Na uzuri, those kind of crimes they trend. Kama watu wa kutengeneza TV anasema TV ni ilikuwa mbaya na inajulikana locality TV there was a problem. So wezi wanakuja kuangalia kwamba tumetumwa maneno ya TV. Sisi na bebwanga. We are talking about those very basics that we be conscious every other time that you own. Kama ni kwako, unajua ni kwako. So utapanga ingia namna hiyo. Something that happens very commonly. Mtu anajua umezoea kama ni taxi fulani. Hiyo ndio taxi yangu. In terms of security ni hatari sana. Boda. Hata mwingine unamtuma chukua hivi vitu peleka huko. Lakini ile kitu anascan, ile kitu anaendelea kusoma kuhusu kwako, wewe hujui. Wengine wewe ni mzee, watu wameenda safari ya wako nyumbani, hata gari huko naye lakini unaiacha mahali sababu siku hiyo nataka kutindika ya kutosha sababu upelekwe na taksi nyumbani. Sasa unapiga kijana unamwambia uko mbali. Bwana ni leo unajua hata mama walienda kusalimia watu yao. Leo nataka kuingia nichomewe nyama mahali, nitachukua about 2 hours hivi. Uwe tayari nitakuja kukupigia. Si umemweleza hakuna mtu nyumbani? Na wewe mlijuana lini taksi na grid iko? Si anakupelekanga anaona hata anabeba vitu anaweka kwa nyumba na vitu kwa hiyo nyumba. Those 2 hours yatafanya operation ya kutosha na gari ikuje ibebe vitu iende. But it's you. Your weakness, you are trying to reveal too much to somebody haina haja ajue ni kitu gani inaendelea. Very common kwanza akina mama. Taxi. Umeenda ukanunua gas, mpaka karibu anaenda kukusaidia kufiti gas. Huyo ni mtu gani unaleta kwa nyuma anaenda kufiti? Jiulize. So all around you got to be very conscious every other time. Ni nani? Musa watu, mzee mgeni anakuja, expected relative, atakuwa PCD. In the absence of that, nothing. Weta mtu aulize kwa mlango, iwe ni maneno ya stima, hata vitu fulani waachana hiyo. Kama hana capacity ya kufanya to do. The advice that you consider having dogs. But sometimes you are advised not to avoid funguo zako. Mfanyikazi akikuja hata utamjua umempatia. Anaenda anaunda kwa sabuni anapima ako na copies za kutosha. Ile siku mnamalizana na yeye anakumaliza vizuri sababu atajua njia zako zote. All around what we are saying, take measures ndio mtu asiwe anaingia kwako ovyo. Na kwa physical security tunasema juu ya 4Ds that kwamba wakati hata unaweka fence, unaweka mlango, what you are conscious about ni kujaribu kuzuia, to deter, detect na kudelay unauthorized access. Tunaongeza ingine ya kudetain. Kwamba kama uko na nguvu, mtu unamshuku, unaweza kumshika umweka kwa nyumba pale ukingojea askari. Lakini kama anakushinda nguvu utafanya hivyo kweli? Mimi nakumbuka zamani nikiwa kijana, yuko paka ilikuwa inapenda kufyonza maziwa kwa nyumba. Mimi nikaingia nimechukua kijiti nilikuwa nachunga ng'ombe, nikafunga mlango. Mimi na paka kwa nyumba, mimi ni yeye. Siku hiyo niliongea lugha ya mama. Sijui kama ilisikia lakini niruhusu nikatoka nje. So even in detaining, wakati unaamua unataka kudetain mtu, fikiria sana utamweza. Yes. It also happened in Parkland police station. The officers who detected or suspected gari inaweza kuwa iko na explosives. Lakini because they were not sensitive enough, siwaingia kwa hiyo gari. Parkland. Silienda kulipuka. So that's why we advise in security kwamba angalia, the issue of detention should be the last option. Na uchipime kama unaweza kufanya anything. Uko nyumbani, you got to be conscious about the issue of the fencing. Tunasema security divine sio mtu akiingia kwako kama kutoka barabara anaingia tu mpaka hapo, naona hapa ni mteremko. But there is a gate, unaona arrangement vile inaenda, a strong door, hata unatumia uswahili kidogo, wengine unaweka kifuli hata mtu akia nje juu huko ndani. All those are measures in place ya kudelay kama mtu angetaka kuja kuingilia kwa boma yako. The issue of lighting, naturally you have to weka katata, ukitoka nje unaweka taa inamulika environment ile, unaona inakaa namna gani. Hata ukitoka kwa nyumba, ukitoka asubuhi, iko watu akitoka kwake anatoka ni kama anaenda kupiga report kwa police, there is an emergency. Unatoka kwa mlango kwa gate, na kumbe hapa kwako watu walikuwa na mkutano usiku hapo, hata walikula hapa, unaona masigara iko hapa, uko na watchman, hata usiku ujue anaitwa nani, namuita watchi. That's very common, watchi. Kama ni msichana unaambia hiyo ni auntie. Hata ujue kwao ni wapi, ameua watoto ngapi, amefanya vitu gani, bora ulipatiwa na mama fulani, unamuita na auntie na mnaendelea. But this time around we are saying be very conscious about, because security starts with you. The issue of access, alarm, intruder system, ni zingine ziko huko juu. Kwa nyumbani umeiconsider kitu naita zoning, iko gate kutoka huko, iko gate ya pili. The whole idea is that process, kweli mtu kama hata anataka kuja ovyo ovyo, atajiuliza ama gate tu itakuwa iko maumbwa, utakuwa umezuia. Other security measures outside the house, which is very common, utapata kama if I talk of an issue kama ya simu. Sometimes we give you a lot of information kwa simu. I remember a case where nilikuwa nataka kusaidia kijana mwingine alikuwa anataka advocate, na iko moja nilikuwa namjua, nikamtafuta mchana yote simpati. Nikampigia jioni, bibi yake anachukua simu. Nikampigia story, nikamwambia kwamba nimemtafuta tangu mjana, iko mtu anataka asaidie mahali KPCD kwa karibu saa 3 hivi. Ambia alikuwa kotini, nimeshukuru. Nataka umwambie akija. Hata mimi niko bedroom, mimi nangoja yeye yako sitting room. You see, mara moja hii inaweza kuwa ni kweli anamngoja, but should I know that? What I'm saying that kwa simu iko mambo mengi. Hata ninyi mnasafiri, unasikia kwa gari mtu akiongea, ukifuata iko namna gani. Kijana mwingine tulikuwa nasafiri na yeye mahali, anambia mdozi, hiyo pesa iko sawa. Ukiona nimefaida sokisi mzito, yeye anachukua hata 500,000. Mimi najua kwa hiyo ni pesa anapeleka kwa bank. Mkubwa yake anataka ukaution yeye, kweli naona ako na hiyo sokisi. Kama niko na nia nyingine sindaenda nayo. So let us be very conscious tukiwa kama viongozi, what do we talk and where. Issue kama M-Pesa, very common, abused. Mtu anakutumia fake message ya M-Pesa, ate pesa unaona figure ya pesa tu. You don't interrogate kwa sababu kwamba imetoka wapi. Kwa kesi rafiki yangu mmoja tulikuwa shule zamani, ukuta uko Nakuru. Yeye mtu amempigia, ameona message ya 17,000 shillings. Na yeye saa mtu ya kanisa anasoma gazeti, anaona mtu anambia, sorry nimetuma pesa. Akafinya. Alikuwa na saidi ya 34,000. Na tena anamrudia, mimi naona si network ndio mbaya. Akafinya ya pili. 34,000 ilienda. Najia kudanganya ina mkubwa ama mdogo. These are things that the trend that nataka tuwe conscious about. Ukishikia unaeneza kwa mwingine, ndio tunasema ta partnerships OCS yakijua napeleka kwa nyumba 10, mambo inajulikana. Ziko nyingi false message hizo ziko. Pesa kimakosa nimetuma kwako. Wengine hata mwingine anitumia, anampigia simu ananiambia kwa majina kamili naitwa Yusuf kaka shui nini, naambia wacha na makaka yako hiyo. Okay, because I'm conscious, hii story anataka kuongea officially, hii ni ukora tu. And this is very common. Vile tuko tunakuwa na deni, yuko mtu wengine amekuomba pesa nini. Kufika asubuhi unaona kwa simu yako, usitume kwa hiyo, tuma kwa hii. Mmekuliwa pesa? That is very common. And wakati inafanyika na mwenyewe inaenda, you don't umwambie hata mwenzako. Wewe unakaa nayo tu, acha na mwingine akuliwe. So these are things that we say. You see, you say. You hear, you say. You suspect. Ndio sasa tu tunachungana. Ngine iko kazi yangu na alitumia message kwamba iko pesa atapata kutoka Canada, anaonekana atume 50,000 ya kusaidia kuprocess. Na mimi namwambia wewe unadanganya bwana. Iko kesi nyingine ilikuwa kwa Kaimosi, principal anadanganya hata account ya bank that there is some charity, some West Africa kwanza. iko family kisiasa ilidhulumiwa, but iko an lot of money. Hiyo mastori mrefu inakuwa printed inaletwa. Lakini wanataka akaunti yako, waje mjua mapini na pesa itaenda. Na hiyo kasi yangu nilikuwa nasema kana alituma hiyo 50,000. Despite kumwambia kwamba wewe una hiyo bwana, mimi nakwambia bwana najua hivi vitu. Wapi si alituma? Alikuwa kuniambia baadaye bwana, kumbe uniambia ukweli. Ilienda ikienda. So those are things that we should be very conscious about. Mwingine hata South Africa unaitwa aenda kubeba mizigo. Kama unaenda kubeba drugs unataka kutumika tu uone kama itafika. Donations hizo zote ziko namna hiyo. Observe environment. I said ukitoka kwako nyumbani angalia vizuri, understand vile nakaa, tembea huko kwako. Hata mama tembea, unaweza kupata mtu aliruka fence miguu imekanyaga hapa. Pengine mtu alirudi akaingia amejificha kwa store mahali, mkienda endelea na kazi. Understand your environment. Let your home be your home. Understand it. Hapana toka kama unaenda kuripoti emergency kwa polisi, uangalie anything. Unaenda watchman yako afuti sigara, unapita ukigonga mpisa ya sigara, kumbe wenzake wezi walikuwa huko usiku ndio wanakuwa mkutano kwako. Avoid getting home same time in the night every other time. Ni ku avoid routine. Kanjia fulani saa fulani kama watakuwa amefika hapa, gazeti atachukua hapa. Wacha na hiyo. Hapana piga njia moja kama panya. Saa nyingine badilisha. Enda, wacha hata gari town kuja na taxi. Na taxi hapana kuja na kuacha kwa mlango yako. You don't want him to know. It works very well. Akuacha kali na mgango na wana tembea kidogo. Ndio utagundua anakuwa na interest. Hata uko safe. Kwani yeye ndiye anakuchunga. Anataka kujua unaingia wapi. All these are things that we meet every day. You avoid routine. That's what we are talking about. And avoid overcrowded areas this time of terrorism. Najua nilikuwa na 5 minutes. Security in your houses. I repeat, you have the overall responsibility ya kuchunga kwako. Hakuna mtu mwingine anakuchungia. Kisa ingine tulikuwa naye training somewhere, mzee amesikia sauti nje, haja chipanga, hana sword, hana anything. Anauliza mama, ile kisu ninunue juzi ya jikoni. Mimi naona kama iko mtu. Mama anamwambia, ile wasichana waliosha vitu siko huko nje kwa masufuria. Sasa wewe mzee utachunga nani? Heshima yako. What we are saying, be very conscious about wewe mwenyewe vile unachunga na usio kwa wengine. Sio maneno imetosha.
Makofi tena. Ingawa ana discipline. Ladies and gentlemen, mmesikia ile kazi tunajua zaidi ya security, personal security. Wewe unabeba pesa mingi, mamilioni, because some of you nikiangalia uso ni matajiri. Mmekuja tu kuchukua knowledge, lakini you are rich people. Mungu asaidie nyinyi, si ndio? Wewe umeomba bunduki au unataka polisi moja up to 400 Kenyans aje anachunga wewe kwa nyumba. Iko polisi apatikana? Kwa nini bado omba bunduki for your personal security? Wewe unaendesha V8 nyeusi na wewe una bunduki. Unakuja uchungwa na nani na waizi wanafikiri wewe iko na pesa au namna gani? So kwa hivyo hiyo personal security na lazima mjichunge. Sasa kabla mimi kuinvite our guest Dr. Sophie Macharia, ningependa kusema hivi na msikize vizuri. Sisi watu wa nyumba Kumi tunaonanga kama Mungu aliumba Sophie roho yake akiwa na murare iko juu. Au namna gani? Because Sophie, she is very special to us in nyumba Kumi. Mungu wako ameambiwa, na msikize vizuri, we want dialogue. Okay. Sitakuja kuintroduce here baadaye, lakini wacha introduce here tuende lunch. Hata peana saa hii. lakini nitaintroduce yeye akija tu aingie kwa kiwanja. Sophie Mungu aliumba roho yake kama akiwa hakuna ile tunasikianga bila dialogue, no elections. Bila referendum, no elections. Mnasikianga hivyo? Bila IBC must go. Wewe ukiwa unasukuma namna hiyo unaweza? Alafu mass action. Si inasumbua mtu. Mungu alikuwa fresh, hakuna mambo kama hiyo, akaumba Sophie. So kwa hivyo nitawachilia nyinyi muende lunch. Unajua chairman yanipeangi ruhusa kila mara kuongea, lakini leo nimejipea mimi mwenyewe ruhusa. Au namna gani? Na hiyo mambo yote nakuanga sasa zimetoboka. Roho choke ku. Hata sisi wa Meru tunasema roho choke mukaro. Kana mukuruine. Au namna gani mwali? Tunasemanga hivyo, roho choke mutarone. Kwa hivyo hii ni wakati hiyo ya kufanya hiyo kazi na muende lunch, lakini start muanze kupiga picha nje. Ukianza kupiga nje picha wakati ya lunch na unasikia saa imeenda, sasa hamtakuwa na discipline. Kweli urongo? Asanteni sana. Ngoja kidogo. Ngoja kidogo.
Asante sana komanda. Sijui kama ni mimi na sijui kama mawaidha yangu ni kama ya mwingine yeyote, lakini naona kama tumepoteza a lot of knowledge.